Hello, huge movie fanatic Nate stopping on by. Once again coming at you for a movie review. Today I will be reviewing the movie by the name of Fire in the Sky. The UFO movie that came out in 1993 starring D.B. Sweeney, Robert Patrick, Craig Schaefer, Peter Berg, and James Garner. So my history with this movie goes all the way back to when it was released in the theaters in 1993. I can remember seeing it in the theater with a buddy of mine at the time. And I can't remember who the hell took us, if it was my mom or probably my dad, I would imagine. And liking the movie quite a bit. Obviously, this movie played really well on the screen. I mean, it was really a movie that really worked really well on the big screen, being one of them kind of Panavision widescreen movies. It really worked well on the big screen, and having grown up in the late 70s and throughout the 80s and stuff, obviously the face James Garner was a face from my youth and my childhood growing up. So it was nice to, even at the time James Garner was getting up there in years and I don't think he was really doing necessarily that many movies even at this time. But it was nice to see he's got kind of a bit part as the sheriff or whatever, the doubting sheriff. But it was nice to see him, even in '93 in this movie as well, being like just that classic voice. I mean, who doesn't love the James Garner voice? It's just like, one of them classic actors from the heyday that just, his career just spanned decades. But I guess what I should probably talk about a little bit before I start talking about the movie, to give you guys just a little history on where I come from in regards to this movie and my experience with it, is it was kind of unfortunate in a way. My dad, his older brother, kind of got him into, I don't know at what age, if it was 20, if it was in his 20s or 30s, but regardless of when they got into it, it was happening around the age of when I was a kid and a young kid, where I think his older brother kind of got him into, probably, I would imagine maybe the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind probably maybe sparked both their interests in the potential of, the potential reality of potential, actual UFOs and the existence of aliens and all this kind of stuff. So they took it kind of seriously, and that, obviously when you're exposed to, adults taking something seriously, then to you it kind of, as a kid, as a kind of a more gullible kid, but I mean, I think all kids are more or less kind of gullible, but as a kid, and we're talking I was really young, like, whatever, 5, 6, 7, however the hell old I was and stuff, you just, if adults think it could be real and they're talking about it as if it's real, and just the prospect of the existence of aliens and UFOs and all this kind of stuff, you just kind of accept it as being real. So that'll make you understand a little bit about, how this movie was perhaps a little more creepy or scary of a movie for me as a result, as it would be, or than it would be for your just, average, just normal person who'd go to see this movie, who doesn't really, has no history about, or care anything about the subject matter per se. To me, it was a little more personal because, for better or for worse, probably for worse, my dad and his brother kind of, instilled this, I don't know what, this fear, or I don't know if it was a fear, but just, it was probably for worse because, I had dreams about, alien encounters and shit. I hope they were, I hope they were dreams, but it was probably for worse because, I've had, sleepless nights as a younger kid, or, possibly even into teenagehood as a result of, being around them, as a young kid, talking about this as if it's real. Just for the record, I don't really have these days I don't have really a thought or care one way or another about, the potential existence of aliens. I think it's something, if it's in the media and they're making movies about it, it's just another thing they want you to just they've just put out there to just get people thinking about what ifs and just keep people distracted at the end of the day. But most likely the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind is probably what got my uncle into the whole UFO craze, and probably got my dad into it as well. But anyway, in case you're bored of hearing that, on to my review of the movie. It's funny because I don't know really why we saw this, honestly, but I mean, obviously, I would imagine my dad took us being, more interested in the subject matter, and, we're not going to turn down a movie or whatever, and, I don't think I was really expecting too much from it, but one thing I took away from this movie, it's about this supposed true story from the 70s about this group of loggers who, who on their way back from doing their day of logging, they're cutting down trees and this and that, and see this. It's dark when they're heading back out of the woods. They see this light, and this one guy, this Travis character, gets out and is basically zapped by the UFO. And I will say, like, watching it recently again on DVD, that one shot of like the UFO, like for 1993, that's kind of a bad visual effects job. Like, it's just like really surprised that the same year as summer as Jurassic Park, like the shot of the UFO in this movie, it looks really kind of bad for even for 1993. But the rest of the visuals look pretty good in the movie. I wish I could have. I don't know. If I were them, I probably would have cut out that shot, honestly, of that UFO. It just doesn't. It doesn't. Those effects aren't really on par with, an A movie from 1993, especially the same summer as Jurassic Park. Not to say that, computer effects are realistic looking, but yeah, if I did a Nate cut of this movie, that one shot was kind of a distant shot of, like the small Travis on the ground. And you can see like the bottom of the UFO up on this side or whatever side it is, and like some kind of just mist raining down or whatever. That shot I'd probably put on the cutting room floor, because I think this movie does better, at least with the first half of it, by not showing stuff than it does obviously trying to show the UFO. But it's about, I love how this movie starts too, with like the music in this movie is really creepy, like the din 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 din, and the music is really, I love the music in this movie. But the opening credits are just like a dark woods, and it's just like it's slowly getting brighter and brighter, and you think it's a UFO. This movie does a couple of fun fake outs where you think it's a UFO but it's not, and then it just gets brighter, and by the time the credits are rolling on the screen at the same time, and it's scary music, and by the time the credits are over, this truck comes out of the woods, and you realize it wasn't a UFO, it was the truck, and the guys. This movie kind of does the same thing. What kind of starts with the action scene and goes back to them telling their story about it or whatever, but and then later on there's another fake out scene where the James Garner character stops at stops his car, and he kind of looks like this, oh my god, and you see these lights. It's kind of like a Close Encounters thing from that movie. The lights come down, and you're like, oh my god, is he seeing the UFO? But it's just the train, the lighted train thing arm coming down to keep people from getting in and onto the train tracks thing. And so the story of this movie is, the loggers, their friend Travis gets out of the truck when they see the UFO, gets zapped by it, and it scares the guys. They drive away. One guy decides, Robert Patrick, T-1000, decides to go back and look for him. When he goes back, he's gone. And basically the whole movie is again, I think if you showed a teenager this now, they'd be so bored with this movie. But the whole movie is basically, or at least the first, I'd say 2/3 of this movie is basically Travis being disappeared, and being missing, and these guys being like interviewed, and telling their story to the sheriff, which is James Garner in this case. And as the movie wears on, it's like they become basically the suspects. Like, did you kill Travis and leave him behind? And what'd you do with his body? And there's a big huge manhunt for him, and they can't find his body. And it's just this. It's funny, as the movie wears on, it's because these guys that came to the quote unquote authorities, and they become the suspects, and they got to take lie detector tests, and it's kind of almost like I don't know. I mean, if you're looking for a lot of on-camera UFO action, obviously this isn't the movie for you. But it does have a kind of a cool scene towards the end of the movie, which I'll talk about a little later. But one thing I was really surprised, I didn't think I'd necessarily like this movie very, very much at all, but it takes place like in Arizona. I would imagine it's shot in Arizona. I don't know where it's shot, but one thing I really like about this movie and is just the photography. Like, it's really, really beautiful forest scenes at like the first. It seems like a lot. It's just I love this. One thing I really like about this movie is like it's just a small town atmosphere it has. And at the time in '93, this movie takes place in the '70s, so they did this retro thing where it's all old vehicles, old fashions, so it's got this small town, really cool kind of logging small town feel vibe to the movie. And some of the the forest shots and shots of nature in the forest and stuff are really, really pretty. They do a lot of these long lens shots where the backlit by the sun, and just a lot of pretty just like outdoors nature forest photography in this movie. And I remember being sitting there in the theater in '93 and going, I'd love I just love, I just, maybe nothing's necessarily happening that's amazing right now, but it's really pretty, pretty going on. But what ends up happening, of course, is like the last, at the beginning of maybe the last third of the movie, obviously Travis returns and he's naked, at night in the rain, and he's just naked. And I got to tell you, I think that the feeling was kind of mutual in the theater too. Like I know when that scene happened, like this movie is good. I mean, don't get me wrong. I like it, and there's perhaps a little too much of the interrogating of the guys and Travis being missing, but you have to drag that on and on and on in the movie because to give the viewer the idea, sense of what the characters in the movie are feeling like. For them, it's dragging on and on and on as well. And it's like this relief when, oh my God, they're just about ready to throw all these guys in jail for killing them, and then Travis appears, and it's just, I can still remember that scene where it's just like he gets the phone call, and his wife, Patrick's wife thinks it's a prank, but it's actually Travis on the phone. He's like, oh my God, like, and I can remember seeing it in the theater just being like, oh wow, just having like all of my attention just fixated on the screen, and when they go to drive to meet him, it's like as a viewer I was like, where is he, and looking, and then it's just like, so it worked. I think for me the movie, when Travis is actually discovered and he's naked in the rain at night, and he's just screaming at the top of his lungs when people are coming up, next to, approaching him and stuff. And I think that part of the movie was done really well, where he's just like, we don't know what he's been through, but we have an idea. And I think his acting and, everything that happened there is really realistic. And obviously all these people that, love him, and this one other guy and stuff like that, just everyone wants to ask him questions all at once, and it's just like overload, and, you get bits and pieces of this and that. And it's interesting how the movie really just shifts from the first 2/3 when he's missing to all of a sudden, okay, he's back, and it's like almost like a different movie. Really, it's just like, okay, so it shifts. These guys are no longer obviously wanted for his death, and there's a funny joke where some character says they probably still think we killed you, and even though he's right there and stuff. And obviously the viewer, or at least I can't speak for all the viewers, but me as watching this in the theater, after Travis comes back, he's really like PTSD and just doesn't talk much, and you really kind of, I was just really inquisitive as a viewer, like, oh, I want to get some information, and every time there was like a little bit of a flashback, I was just like, oh, cool, and it's just not enough, it was a tease and stuff like that. So then we cut to the inevitable, and I love how they do it, like the inevitable, like kind of the scene everyone went to the movie to see. And I can't remember trailers for this, but I would imagine, I don't know, they kind of hyped up the end of the end scene, his remembering his time in the being experimented with his time waking up in the alien ship or whatever. But I love the transition, what leads up to him remembering, where he's they throw this huge party for him, and everyone's in the town's there, and he just goes up. I can relate to this. This is what I do too. If someone threw me a party like this, I'd just go into the kitchen and sit under the dinner table. Actually, I'd probably go out of the house and just go for a walk, actually. But Travis goes into the kitchen and sits under the dinner table, and there's this great bit where his girlfriend comes in and is like, what's wrong? And he's like, kind of like a mouse in a corner, an animal in a corner, just like fidgeting, and he like hits the table and the syrup falls over. This is really done well, where the syrup's running and he's freaking out, syrup's running, freaking out, syrup's running, drips over the side of the table and onto his face, and it's just like, oh, and the memory comes back just 100% of what he experienced, because it was, that syrup on his face was kind of like what he experienced waking up, and the aliens clutches or ship or whatever the hell you want to call it. Seeing it again, I haven't seen it for a while, and watching it again, I was just like, why is the fucking the alien? I think maybe I'm an alien, because their place sure is messy, because my place is messy, and God, you think aliens would keep a more tidy freaking spaceship? But as they're pulling it, he wakes up in this human storage facility, where it seems like they just keep dead bodies or live bodies from humans and stuff, and comes out of that, gets all weightless and this and that. But once the aliens grab him, and they're like pulling him weightless through this corridor, it's just like this junk tunnel of all this kind of just tennis shoes and maybe dollies and bicycles, or all kinds of trash. This alien haul of trash from the where they keep it's just like, maybe these aliens are hoarders. Like they don't want to get rid of any Earth, or maybe they've got some kind of an alien eBay on their planet where they can sell all this Earth junk for millions of protoplasm pellets or whatever the hell they use for money on their planet. But it's just funny seeing it as an adult, and as they're carrying them through that corridor towards the operating table. It's like, God, they don't have any cleaning aliens or anything. Like, it's kind of messy in there and non-hygienic, but obviously it's kind of cool. And I do think the effects that they do for the weightlessness and stuff, although you can tell he's obviously got a harness, and he's got the standard probably 2 cables, one on each side of his hip, and they probably, I don't, at the time I'm like, God, how did they get rid of those wires so well? But probably, I was kind of speculating back in the day. I was like, well, if I was going to do it, you'd have a motion control camera, and if you're going to have any camera moves, you'd have him doing, you do a pass with him hanging on the wires in it, and then do your camera move with him, doing his bit, acting with him hanging by those wires, and then you take him out of it and make the same pass with the camera and without him in there, motion control camera move, and then you can basically layer the images on top of each other and get rid of the wires that way. Because I don't think they could necessarily, I guess they could possibly get rid of them, because they did that in '91 with the wires in T2 for the motorcycle, so maybe they did get rid of the wires digitally in '93. But the weightlessness for the time was done pretty well with Travis, and weightless before he got grabbed up by the aliens. And obviously the scene, this is only rated PG-13, but the scene where the aliens grab him and take him into the operating table is really obviously the scene we all went to the movie to see and stuff, and definitely goes there, and it's scary and creepy. And one cool detail about the movie is they kind of do a nod to the, obviously out there in the North, I can't speak for any other parts of the world, but the North America culture is this kind of idea of the aliens with their heads and their big eyes and like just maybe a slit mouth or no mouth or something. And what's really cool about this movie is in this movie they basically say that classic, kind of well perceived or understood, vestige of an alien is, in this movie, they're spacesuits. It's kind of interesting how Travis discovers when he's floating around, he discovers these creepy alien spacesuits all in like a circle, and he realizes that, oh, these are just spacesuits. And later on, obviously not much longer later, we'll discover that the aliens don't actually, they're kind of out of the spacesuits. We never see the aliens in the spacesuit. We just see the spacesuits sitting there or hovering there or whatever. And then, so the aliens in this movie are still kind of, alien looking or whatever, with no nose and big head and small eyes or whatever. But it's kind of an interesting thing that the filmmaker decided to do by turning that, perceived notion of what aliens are on its head and making it like, well, it's not the alien, it's just the alien spacesuit, which is interesting. But obviously the scene where, it's kind of, where he's all, you strip him of his clothes and put that whatever over him, and you do this and that and stick something here and stick something there, and then put the thing over his eye and the liquid, and then the creme de la creme, the thing's coming down towards his eye, and it's like, I mean, for PG-13 that is like really pretty scary. It didn't really scare me this time, but I can remember being in the 1993 in the theater. I was like, oh my God, especially on the big screen. That scene kind of went there. Obviously it cuts before you see anything nasty or anything, but the fact that he's kind of okay, we're seeing this flashback and he's okay, it makes the scene not as horrible. But they obviously saved that scene for closer to the end of the movie, and that's all fine and good. The interesting thing I didn't really talk about in closing about this movie is, this whole experience, with Travis and this and that kind of ruined the main characters, which was also like his best friend. It kind of ruined his marriage, and that guy ended up, probably getting divorced, and he had a couple of young daughters, and that's the Robert Patrick character. And it's interesting at the end of the movie, and it, Travis kind of got mad that, when Robert Patrick admits he left him there, and Robert Patrick got mad about that, and kind of created a rift in the friendship. And the movie ends with, like, I can't remember if it's 5 years later, where the Travis character goes to visit the Robert Patrick character in the woods, and where he's living like a hermit by himself, and a beard and stuff like that, and kind of just like comes to say, I'm sorry, or I forgive you for, or I understand. I forgive you for leaving me there. I understand you were scared, and kind of a, hopefully a beginning of a rekindling of the friendship at the beginning of the movie. And Travis, picks him up and drive, Robert Patrick up and drives him to the what's most likely supposed to be the abduction spot, and just so they can so he can apologize to him and say it's okay, he understands, and so hopefully start the mending process of their friendship. That's how the movie ends, and with this kind of funny line about, Robert Patrick wants to get out of there before it gets dark, and then Travis is like, I don't think they'll be back, I don't think they'd like me, because he kicked one of the aliens in the head, which was kind of funny, and was not an easy human prey for the aliens, and he must have been too ornery, and the aliens probably, like, this guy's too much trouble, we'll just drop him off or whatever. But obviously I don't hold any, I don't give the story of this movie any credence for supposed to be a, supposed based on true story. That doesn't mean anything to me. If it's in the media, I won't talk about it, but we'll just leave it at that. That the whole notion about it's, supposedly based on a true story doesn't mean I take this movie any more seriously than I would if it's just a made-up movie. I just thought I should say that. So my stars for Fire in the Sky will be 3. I'll go 3 stars out of 4 stars for Fire in the Sky. I think it's a really quaint movie from '93. It's interesting how, I guess it's because it takes place in the '70s, but I was going to say how, for being made in '93, it does have the kind of the quaint, the quaintness of a movie actually made in the '70s or possibly '80s. I just wanted to mention that. But the music, the characters are fun. It's funny how, what's his name from, Elliot from E.T. is actually in this movie as well. It's like, God damn it, these alien movies. But he's one of the one of the young loggers. I can't remember his name right now, but Elliot from E.T. is in this movie. And yet again, he's just a side character, which is kind of a bummer. And yet again, another alien movie. But it's just an all-around, I think well-done movie. And just to kind of, obviously there's a little bit of a, whatchamacallit, connection for me, having seen it in the theater, a little bit of that word sometimes I forget about, nostalgic connection to me in regards to this movie. It's something that if you can see for free or relatively inexpensively, I'd recommend it. No big deal. It ain't going to change your life, but, obviously I would imagine if anyone out there who is into the whole, alien thing or alien movies or the potential of aliens, life, and if they're an alien enthusiast like my dad and his brother were, this, and you haven't seen this, maybe it'd be something that you would enjoy. So I guess that pretty much does it for this review. Thanks a lot for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and as always, we'll catch you on the next one.